Smoke curled off the grill like a lazy flag, and country music thumped against the fence slats. Tinny, cheerful, oblivious. Paper plates stuck to sweaty palms. The air smelled like charcoal and sweet corn buttering itself to death. I walked in wearing dress whites because mom asked me to look nice. And apparently, nothing says company like a uniform that shows every fingerprint. Brandon spotted me before anyone else. He leaned back in his folding throne, sunglasses glinting, beer sweating in his grip. Well, well, he drawled loud enough for the yard to hear. Look who showed up pretending to be Top Gun. You even get paid for typing, sailor. Laughter popped like cheap fireworks. I smiled the way you do when you're inventorying exits. My hands found the seam of my skirt. The fabric was too hot, too honest. Dad hovered near the cooler, eyes flitting between me and the grill as if ribs might save him from a sentence he didn't want to pronounce. Jenna! Aunt Carol waved a spatula. Tell Brandon what you do again. Communications, right? Like call centers, but, Navy? I could have given the simple answer. I could have said radios and let the yard store me where it always did, somewhere between the potato salad and the folding chairs. Instead, I tucked a stray hair back, tasted smoke and embarrassment, and said, something like that. Brandon grinned, scent of cologne fighting the meat. Hey, careful, she might encrypt your Wi-Fi. More laughter. The grill popped. Grease hissed like a warning I'd chosen to ignore. I let the joke slide because humility travels faster than pride, and because classified lives better if you keep it fed with silence. Then a voice cut through the yard, deep, sanded by years of salt water and orders. Wait! Uncle Mark set down his beer with the care you use on a grenade you've already pulled. He stood from a lawn chair that had always looked too flimsy for him and turned until his shadow crossed the table like a line drawn with a ruler. His eyes, faded blue, steady, found my face and held. What's your call sign, Lieutenant? The chatter thinned, then quieted. Plastic cups hovered midair. I felt heat from the grill on the back of my knees and the rough bite of the call sign patch stitched inside my dress whites where no one could see it. I met his gaze. Echo Fox. He froze. The yard seemed to tilt. Not a lot, just enough for a family to feel a draft it didn't have words for. The country song on the speaker hiccuped on a scratched lyric and kept going like it didn't want to be responsible. Uncle Mark's chair creaked behind him as if it, too, understood posture. He straightened, the old command settling on his shoulders like a jacket that never stopped fitting. Everyone, he said, voice low enough to carry. Stand up. People blinked, confused, then obeyed. Confused. Chairs scraped. Napkins fluttered. Dad half rose before he knew why. Brandon rolled his eyes and stayed seated a breath too long. Mark turned to him. No heat. Just the kind of stillness that makes men remember they were boys once. And you, apologize. Now. The grill crackled. Somebody dropped a fork. It pinged against the patio and skittered into silence. Brandon's mouth opened, caught nothing, closed. The yard watched him learn a new language, respect without a memo. I was just joking, he tried. My uncle didn't blink. Apologize. Brandon's sunglasses suddenly looked like a shield he couldn't lift. He swallowed. The smoke shifted. The smell of char faded into something cleaner. He stared at me as if he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. I'm sorry, he said, small. It's fine, I answered and meant it more than I wanted to. You didn't know. I could feel the radio headset in a memory press warm against my temple, the embassy night's fire reflecting off windows like angry stars. Most people don't know. That's the point. And the weight. Uncle Mark lifted his chin, the salute slow, deliberate. His fingers trembled just enough to make the air honest. He held it until my throat knotted and Dad, across the yard, looked at me the way he looks at a stubborn bolt finally giving, like respect had torquey. The country song faded. The grill hissed. Somewhere, a neighbor's wind chime added a thin, bright note to the quiet. I returned the salute, the backyard full of the one thing families rarely manage to grill up on command. Silence that listens. I was always the quiet one, which in our family meant you were either listening for trouble or holding it. Grandpa's garage taught us to fix things before we threw them out. Dad stayed there, grease knuckles, good heart, small town orbit. Uncle Mark left Bud S., Blackwater, world-sized maps, and the house made a shrine out of his plaques and tridents. Brandon grew loud under those shadows, telling the room where to stand. I learned to move between people unseen and collect the parts they dropped. When I enlisted, Dad rubbed the back of his neck and stared at the lawn like it might volunteer a better idea. You? He said, soft disbelief. You couldn't even finish ROTC training. It stung, not because it was cruel, but because he believed it was true. Mom squeezed my shoulder and gave him a look that said, "She finishes everything." I did. Top of my class. I kept the certificate in a drawer because paper can't fix how a kitchen remembers your last report card. Comms school smelled like burnt coffee, ozone off racks, plastic warmed by load. I learned the beauty of a clean waveform and the terror of a dirty one. How to make signal cut through thunder, and how not to fall in love with your own voice. The instructors called me unflappable. The notes called me brilliant but headstrong, a compliment and a warning stapled together. I wore both like a headset until they felt like part of my skull. Back home, I was still the kid who fixed radios and set up the Bluetooth speaker properly while grown men congratulated themselves for buying a thing a girl could already use. At birthdays, people asked, "So, like, you do the weather?" And I'd smile and say, something like that, because humor is cheaper than debriefs. No one knew I'd sat on a floor behind a metal desk while an embassy turned into a furnace 2 rooms away. No one knew we'd run cable through a stairwell hot enough to bend conduit, that my call sign had gone out across a city swallowing itself and come back with 8 voices attached. Echo Fox, confirm corridor clear. Echo Fox, jammer rerouted. Echo Fox, breach team extracting. Silence then. Echo Fox, room secure. 8 souls. We don't wear those words. We live under them. Uncle Mark knew the shape of nights like that, but he never used it to make the room smaller. When he came home on leave years ago, he taught Brandon how to hold a rifle like it wasn't a toy, and taught me how to breathe in a hallway until the bend stopped being a threat. "You don't need volume to take space," he said, handing me a folded napkin. "You need presence." He showed me a salute with the corner of that napkin when he thought nobody was looking. It smelled like sauce and respect. Brandon idolized him the way boys do, by building a louder version. He went engineer instead of operator and never let a silence pass unfilled. Defense contractor badge on a lanyard, shoes that clicked on concrete so he could hear himself arriving. "My work saves soldiers," he'd say, flexing a spreadsheet. "Grunts just use it." He said it not to be cruel, but because the room clapped when he did. When I brought home my call sign patch the first time, Dad set it on the mantel between a bowling trophy and an old photo of Uncle Mark in dress blues. He didn't touch it again, as if patch and photo might argue. I started wearing the patch stitched inside my uniform where it pressed the skin above my ribs. Reminder, anchor, a thing that didn't need an audience. The embassy siege never made the news right. The one photo that leaked, smoke, shadows, a radio operator crouched with a headset, hit the wrong forums, got the wrong caption, Navy comms failure. It burned cold when I saw it and then went dark because classified eats its own evidence. We wrote the after action, and the machine filed it away behind thick doors. My voice, calmest under fire, the team said, as if calm is something you can pack, lived on a drive with a label I wasn't cleared to read. So, when I walked into the backyard with a bowl of Mom's potato salad, and Uncle Mark said, "What's your call sign?" I felt the napkin salute and the embassy heat, and Dad's doubt and Brandon's mouth line up behind my teeth. I answered because some names aren't yours until you say them where it matters. Echo Fox. You could feel the yard change temperature by a degree. The radio on the picnic table hiccuped between songs. The grill caught, then steadied. Uncle Mark's eyes did something rare for him. They softened and sharpened at once. Brandon watched, confused, like an engineer seeing a circuit diagram that doesn't fit the box he designed for it. Families write their own protocols. Ours had 3. Tease, eat, repeat. That day, a 4th finally made the list. Listen. The heat hit harder near the grill. Grease hissed. A wasp circled the soda line like a tiny patrol. Brandon held court at the picnic table, tapping his phone for effect, bottle caps and a neat little constellation by his elbow. Real work update. he announced, waggling the screen. People like me design the tech that keeps soldiers like you from screwing up. Forks paused. The speaker kicked into another twangy chorus. I felt the call sign patch under my whites, warm against my rib. Congrats on saving the world with Excel, I said, light as paper. He smirked, thumb already scrolling. Speaking of, check this out. He zoomed a grainy image. Smoke thick as wool, a corridor lit by fire, a crouched operator with a headset bent over a radio crate. Total chaos. Navy comms failure. Classic Jenna department. My chest tightened like someone had yanked a strap. That photo lived in a vault and in my bones. Embassy floors I'd memorized. A half-melted conduit elbow. The scorch on the crate's corner shaped like a dog's ear. I'd cut my palm on it. Uncle Mark's shadow cooled the table. Where'd you get that? He asked, voice low enough to move air. Online, Brandon said, pleased with himself. Some Reddit leak. Government clowns mess up. The internet fixes it. That's classified, I whispered, the word tasting like metal in a hallway too hot to touch. Brandon laughed once, brittle. Relax, it's public now. Uncle Mark's eyes narrowed, old habit recalibrating threat. He studied the pixel blur like it owed him names. Who posted it? Doesn't matter, Brandon said. Point is, this is why the brass needs real engineers. Country music, grease hiss, cicadas sawing the fence line. Everything sounded suddenly too loud. I recognized the angle. A helmet cam from the stairwell landing. If you knew what to look for, you could read our whole layout. Mom slid a tray of ribs down between us, barbecue smoke sweet sharp. Food, she chirped, terrified of silence. No one reached. I set my palm flat on the table to steady the shake. Delete it, I said. Oh, come on, Brandon said. News is news. That's not news, I said, voice thin-edged now. That's people still breathing because someone held a signal. He rolled his eyes. You fix radios, Jenna. Don't make it poetry. Uncle Mark didn't look at him. He looked at me. You were there, he said, not a question. I nodded once. Heat climbed my collar. The headset ghosted my temple. A voice in my memory barked Echo Fox. Jammer rerouted. And the interference dropped like a curtain. 8 souls. Brandon snorted. So what, you hid in a closet and pressed talk? The yard shifted. Chairs creaked. The dog stopped panting. I watched Uncle Mark's hands curl slow on the edge of the table, old tendons making new lines. He spoke to Brandon without raising his voice. Take it down. Dad. Now. Brandon's thumb hesitated, then tapped. The photo collapsed to a home screen of app icons and self-belief. He tossed the phone down like it hadn't just dragged a room across a line. I turned the screen face down anyway. That image compromises tactics, I said. And people. He opened his mouth. Uncle Mark saved him from the next mistake. Son, he said, eyes still on me. Do you have any idea who you're mocking? Brandon glanced between us, sensing a door he'd never noticed. She's not just anything, Mark said. The grill popped, a small gunshot of fat and flame. Eat your food. The song ended. A new one didn't start. Over the fence, a neighbor's wind chime gave a thin, moral little clink. I folded my napkin, corner to corner, slow, like a salute you keep to yourself. Fire, radio, smoke, everything that made the photo, settled back where it belonged. Inside my chest, classified until called. Dad fiddled with the propane knob like it had feelings. Grease hissed. A ribbon of flame licked up and went modest again. The yard tried to restart its small talk. Weather, mortgage rates, whether the corn was over. But the air had the hush of a church between hymns. Brandon recovered first. He clinked his bottle against a chair back and did a 2-finger salute. Wrist limp, grin crooked. At ease, echo whatever. Echo Fox lived where I kept my patience. I reached into the pocket of my dress whites for my work phone, the matte black one that never pinged unless it meant it. Screen dead. Good. I tapped a code. Better. I angled away from the table and spoke soft. Echo Fox to command. Confirm status of Foxtrot Delta 19. My voice found the old frequency. Calm laid over a wire. Static breathed, Then a voice crisp enough to shave with cut through the tiny speaker, loud enough for the table to hear. Echo Fox, read you Bravo clear. FD19 status is classified Bravo level. Clearance confirmed. Say again, this net is live. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Mom set a bowl down too hard. It clacked, then settled. Someone's sandals squeaked against concrete. I ended the call and put the phone face down next to the ribs. Brandon's laugh died halfway up his throat. What, was that staged? Uncle Mark didn't look at him. He looked at me with an expression I'd seen once on a tarmac, watching a medevac bird land, relief braided to respect. Both held quiet. Who's on that net? He asked softly. A friend, I said. Still on duty. He nodded once. The old operator math ran behind his eyes, call sign, code, cadence, and arrived where I'd been living. He turned to his son. Son, he said, the word stripped of softness. Do you have any idea who you're mocking? She's just, Brandon began, defaulting to the smallest word in his vocabulary. She's the reason my last extraction team made it home. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The grill popped like punctuation. Chairs creaked as bodies adjusted to the new geometry of the yard. Dad hovered near the cooler, fingers whitening on the lid. He looked at me, then at Mark, as if trying to find the right socket for a truth that didn't fit his toolbox. Brandon huffed, grasping for safety. You told me that op was chaos. Comms down, bad intel. I told you what I could with a classification stamp on my tongue, Mark said. He turned back to me, eyes steady. You were the calmest voice I ever heard under fire. The words hit like cool water. Embers settled in the grill with a soft sigh. Across the yard, the neighbor's wind chime rang one clear, thin note that sounded like attention. Brandon tried swagger again, brittle at the edges. He picked up Mom's folded napkin and mimed another lazy salute. Well, ma'am, thank you for your service to the... Mark's hand came down on the table. Flat, controlled, loud enough to stop the sentence without breaking the wood. Bottle caps jumped. The wasp lifted off the soda and changed its mind midair. Enough, he said. Silence rearranged itself. I heard the tiny fizz of cola in a red plastic cup and the low tick of fat cooling on grill bars. Small sounds you only notice when nobody wants to be the first to breathe wrong. I glanced at Dad. His mouth worked around a thought. Jenna, he said quietly, is Echo Fox you? The question was a bridge, rickety but building. Yeah, Dad, I said, "Look, it's me." He nodded like a man testing a bolt and finding torque. Pride and apology stood shoulder to shoulder in his eyes and didn't fight. Brandon stared at the phone like it might switch sides again if he glared hard enough. So those leaks are not your toys, I said. They're other people's last good seconds. The speaker on the picnic table changed tracks. The new song started soft, a steel guitar that sounded like fog burning off water. Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel and put a plate in front of me the way you feed someone who just came in from weather. Eat, she said, voice wobbling toward normal. Everything's better if we don't let it get cold. Mark stayed standing, palms planted, shoulders easy but set. The yard's center of gravity had moved. I felt the call sign patch under my whites press warm against my rib, the way a secret sits right before it stops needing to be one. Uncle Mark straightened until the yard remembered what posture was. The grill hissed. A drip of fat hit flame and popped like a small round of punctuation. Heat breathed against my calves. Flies reconsidered their plans. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at me, quick nod, receipt, and then at Brandon. His voice came out low, tight, trained. I read her after action. Brandon tried a shrug that didn't fit. Dad, it was chaos? Mark cut in. She made it language. He tapped 2 fingers on the picnic table. Tap, tap, like keying a mic. Echo Fox rerouted enemy jammers mid-firefight. His eyes came back to me, softened, then set. Saved 8 lives. The yard pulled a breath and held it. Smoke sweetened, then thinned. Somewhere, a bottle cap settled with a tiny metallic sigh. 8, he repeated, quieter. Including mine. Brandon's mouth made a shape. No sound came. He glanced at the phone he'd flipped, as if it might spit him a better line. It didn't. Country music stalled and clicked into a slower track, fiddle and steel, and the backyard's noise turned into a kind of listening. He tried again. So what? She sat safe, pressed stop. Mark's palm met the table, flat, controlled. The plates jumped a quarter inch and whispered back down. You weren't there. Brandon's sunglasses slid down his nose. He didn't push them up. She fixes radios. She builds corridors, Pa, Mark said. The kind men walk home through. Silence learned a new shape. I could hear the fizz in a red cup, the quiet chew of a dog under the table, the soft, impatient breath my father took and held. Mark turned to me. The smoke lifted. His eyes were clear blue under it. Stand up, he said. To the yard this time, not me. Chairs scraped back. Cousins, aunts, neighbors, even Dad with a dish towel in his fist. They rose, awkward and perfect, the kind of stand that isn't ceremony so much as instinct remembering itself. Mom wiped her hands, touched my elbow, and stepped aside like a stagehand clearing a mark. Mark faced his son. Stripped of ornaments, his voice went down to truth. Apologize. Dad, I didn't. Now. The word arrived like a door shutting, softly, permanently. Wind curled a corner of the paper tablecloth. It flapped once and gave up. Brandon swallowed. His throat clicked loud in the quiet. He looked at me as if I'd climbed out of a photograph he'd captioned wrong. Color had left his face. Bravado had followed. I'm sorry, he managed. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said. I kept it gentle. Now you do. His shoulders dropped a fraction, as if something finely heavy had been set down. He nodded, short, honest. The wasp returned to the soda and decided against it again. Mark turned from him to me. The salute took him a second to build. Fingers finding the right angle, tremor visible and earned. He held it long enough for the yard to understand the price of the gesture. I brought my hand up, heat slick under my palm, and returned it. My fingertips touched my brow. My chest felt suddenly wider, like the uniform had stopped being a disguise and remembered its job. Dad stood with the dish towel twisting in his grip. Pride fought apology on his face, and for once they didn't wrestle. Jenna, he said, rough, like the name needed sandpaper to get out. You. He stopped, laughed once, helpless. You did good, kid. A laugh rippled the edge of the crowd and died politely. Air moved, the smoke chased itself toward the fence and found the sky. The speaker clicked and found its chorus again, lower, respectful, as if the playlist had been briefed. Brandon cleared his throat. That Reddit thing. Delete it, Mark said. Tell your friends. Leaks get people killed. Brandon nodded fast. Yes, sir. Don't sir me, Mark said. Understand me. Yes, he said, smaller. I lifted the work phone, tapped a code, and the screen bloomed to the secure home. I set it down where everyone could see the black quiet of it. Some things stay silent, I said, and that's how people live. Country winded through steel strings. The dog sighed under the table and let his head flop onto his paws. A napkin drifted off a plate and landed on my shoe. I picked it up, folded it corner to corner, and slid it beneath my hand, my own small salute to the moment. Mark exhaled, the long, relieved kind that men do after too many years of holding their breath underwater. He looked at the grill, then at me. You fed us, he said, meaning the net, not the ribs. Just kept the line open, I said. He gave one small nod, the old operator's copy. Then he pivoted back to the group and almost shyly back to ceremony. At ease, he said. The yard didn't sit right away. People lingered with their spines straight, as if gravity had been recalibrated, and nobody wanted to squander it. Then chairs scraped, plates resumed, someone laughed the right size. Mom's hand found mine under the table. She squeezed, quick, and let go. Uncle Mark lowered his salute like lowering a flag at dusk. Slow, precise, tender. Brandon hovered near the cooler, then stepped up, awkward. He held out a bottle of water like a white flag. Truce? Respect, I said. It sticks better. He nodded, swallowed a lesson, and walked away to delete a link he'd never admit to posting. I sat again. The world resumed its textures: char and sugar, sun on plastic, the buzz of a neighbor's mower 2 houses over. In the pit of the grill, a coal glowed its private red and then eased content. He'd mocked my silence all afternoon. The backyard finally let silence speak louder than him. Dusk took the edge off the heat. The grill settled into a low red, breathing charcoal and pepper into the air. Cicadas sawed the fence line. Paper plates stacked. The speaker clicked softer. I stayed by the coals with Uncle Mark while everyone drifted toward pie and apologies they didn't know how to make. He turned a rib with tongs he didn't need, metal tapping great. "You know," he said, voice down to human. "I told command your voice was the calmest I've heard under fire." I let myself smile. The radio memory warmed like the grate. "You never said you were on that net." "I was." He set the tongs down, hands open. "Didn't want to embarrass the rookie who saved me." "Hard to embarrass a quiet person," I said. He huffed a laugh. Smoke ghosted between us. "I stayed quiet here for you," he added. "He classified by safety." He looked toward the house where Mom rinsed plates, the window catching kitchen light. "But humiliation isn't protection. That's on me." "It's done," I said. "We wrote it clean." He nodded. "Copy." The coals clicked as a crust fell, tiny glass sounds. He glanced at my work phone face down by the ketchup. "Still Echo Fox?" "Until they make me louder," I said. He grinned. "Don't let 'em." Dad hovered near the cooler like a man studying weather. He came over with 2 waters, knuckles greasy, eyes shiny the way men's get when they discover a new bolt head fits an old wrench. He offered 1 bottle to Mark, 1 to me. "Guess the radio girl did all right," he said. I touched the cap to his in a soft clink. "Took a good antenna," I said. "Had the garage," heh, he answered, wiping his hands on a shop towel that had somehow wandered into the yard. "And a brother who taught posture." He looked at Mark, then at me. "And a daughter who taught both of us the rest." We stood without filling the air. The grill's glow dropped to embers. Somewhere inside, a timer dinged and someone cheered for pie-like relief. Brandon passed by, the swagger gone, phone dark. "It's down," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Good," I said. "Build what saves. Don't weaponize curiosity." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Uncle Mark nudged my elbow with 2 fingers. "Silver looks better than smoke," he said, meaning the metal he knew was pending. "But this," he gestured at the grill, the yard finally listening. "This is the commendation I care about." "Same," I said. The radio in my pocket gave 1 polite buzz. No crisis, just a schedule. I silenced it. The night thickened enough to taste char and mint from Mom's planter, the sweet fatigue of a family learning a new note. Mark cleared his throat, suddenly formal. "For the record," he said, "thank you." "For the record," I answered. "You're welcome." Cicadas kept time. The last flame ticked out. Flame ticked. We let the quiet finish the sentence. Weeks later, the citation arrived in an envelope heavy enough to land with a sound. The paper smelled like ink and ceremony. The words carried their own posture. Silver Star, Valor in Communications Command. Dad turned it in his hands like a part he'd machined himself, testing edges, trusting weight. Mom dabbed the corners of a picture frame with glass cleaner, as if clarity were something you could add. We hung the metal in the living room between Uncle Mark's trident and a black and white photo of Grandpa's garage. Sun from the window made the ribbon go a shade brighter. The star threw a pin of light onto the wall, a steady little spark, like a coal that refused to cool. Dad stepped back, wiped his fingers on a shop towel out of habit, and said, half to himself, "Guess the radio girl did all right." I caught his eye and saw it. Respect, finally finding a socket it fit. Family drifted in, practicing a smaller kind of talk. Brandon came last, sunglasses gone, phone nowhere in sight. He stood in front of the frame, hands in pockets, and cleared his throat. "I told the guys at work," he said, voice trimmed. "That leak was wrong. I told them to build for people, not headlines." He looked at me, held it. "Thank you for saving who you save." I nodded. "Thank you for listening." Uncle Mark hovered near the doorway. not intruding on a scene he'd earned but wouldn't claim. He gave me a two-finger tap to the shoulder, operator's shorthand for copy, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a square of folded paper napkin. He put it on the mantel, edge aligned, a quiet callback. I returned the napkin's salute corner to brow. The room breathed as one. That night, after the cousins left and the house settled into the small sounds, ice machine murmuring, AC clicking, the fridge giving a little sigh, I took my headset from its case and set it by the hearth. The grill out back was cold, but a faint char hung in the screen porch air, fire's ghost reminding wood what warmth felt like. I let the ear pads rest in my palms. The plastic carried a trace of salt and hand soap. The mic boom still bore a small nick where a stairwell once snapped at me. Tools, not trophies. Dad came in with two mugs and a softness I'd only ever seen when weather held us inside. "You know," he said, easing onto the couch, "your voice on that thing." He gestured at the headset. "It changed the way I hear this house." He meant the silences, the pauses that used to feel like absence and now felt like room. We sat there, warm light on the metal, the radio quiet, the last smudge of smoke in the porch seam. Out in the dark, cicadas sawed time into the summer. In here, Mom folded a dish towel with military corners and laid it over the arm of a chair. Uncle Mark stepped onto the porch, checked the grill like a habit, and left the lid shut. No need to stir ashes that had done their job. Before bed, I walked out to the yard with the headset, held it up to the night like a question, then brought it back inside. Some channels you keep open by choosing not to use them. On the mantel, the silver star threw its steady pin of light on the wall again. It looked less like glory and more like a signal. Received, acknowledged, relayed. In the quiet, I heard it. Not applause, not correction, just listening. The kind that makes room for a call sign to mean more than letters. The kind that lets a backyard become a brief, honest stage where people learn posture without being told. Respect didn't arrive in rank. It arrived when the fire dimmed, when the radio stopped needing to speak, when a family stood, because a voice asked nothing and meant everything. I touched the edge of the frame, felt the cool glass, and let the house keep its silence. Honor doesn't shout. It speaks when silence finally listens. If quiet courage is your language, tap subscribe. True stories where radios hum, fires fade, and respect stands at last.